Why was she the only one not afraid as the plane's ramp groaned open? The air blasted in, hot, choking, full of ochre dust that swirled like smoke from a dying fire. A dozen young soldiers clutched their rifles as if wood and steel could save them from the mountains outside. Their eyes darted like nervous prey. Only one figure stood still. Her duffel bag rested in her loose grip, boots planted, posture relaxed, as if she had been here before. Specialist Anna Vyulov, 48 years old, hair tied in a graying ponytail that whipped in the wind, her face unreadable. She was last in line, and the receiving sergeant barely glanced at her. To him, she wasn't a soldier. She was a paper pusher, a logistic transfer from somewhere high above his pay grade, a middle-aged woman in a world of young men, the kind who got shuffled into forgotten corners of the war until retirement paperwork caught up. But Anna's eyes told another story. As she walked down the ramp, boots crunching against dust and stone, she scanned without being obvious. A glance at Tower 3, its field of fire blocked by stacked containers. A flick of her gaze at the ridgelines where shifting gusts would carry any sniper's bullet off target. To others, the landscape was endless rock and sky. To her, it was a map of vulnerabilities. A puzzle box of threats waiting for someone patient enough to solve it. They didn't see it, they didn't care. Forward operating base Kestrel shimmered in the heat, tents and barriers scattered like bones at the foot of jagged peaks. It was the kind of place where careers went to die. For Anna, it was simply the next square on the board. The sergeant handed her orders without even looking at her face. Supply depot, tent 4, logistics. That was all, no welcome, no briefing, not even a nod. As she walked deeper into the camp, she felt the stares. Young Marines, NCOs, officers in passing. Their glances carried the same weight, dismissal. To them she was furniture, background noise, a body filling a slot. And she accepted it without protest. That was her way. The quiet ones didn't need to announce themselves. Inside the depot, a boy barely out of his teens, Corporal Evans, introduced her to the system. His voice slow, condescending, as if explaining to a child how to use a scanner. He smiled politely, but his tone betrayed the truth. She was an outsider. Anna listened, nodding once. Then she got to work. Barcodes, boxes, inventory. Movements efficient, precise. Each gesture small, controlled. She gave nothing away, but her gaze strayed only once toward the armory. A familiar smell drifted from behind its steel racks, CLP oil, sharp and metallic. To her, it was the scent of home. Evans noticed her glance. "Don't worry about that, ma'am. We've got armorers for the rifles. Your station, over here." She nodded again. "Understood, Corporal." Her voice was stone dropped into deep water, steady, unfazed. She bent to her work again. But in her mind, she was somewhere else. The ridgelines, the thermals, the shadows. She was learning the mountain's language. Every morning long before dawn, she walked to the western perimeter with a cup of coffee in hand. She studied the wind, the kestrels wheeling above the valley, the way the sun carved false shapes into stone. To others, it was scenery. To her, it was a battlefield she was already mapping. Inside Colonel Madson's office, her name was a problem. He held her file in one hand. Thin pages, half of it blacked out in redaction. No unit history for 10 years, just the label, logistics. His office was absurdly polished, a mahogany desk gleaming under air conditioning while men outside roasted under desert sun. His eyes were hard, his tone sharper still. Specialist Vyulov, administrative transfer, no record of combat deployment, logistics. He let the words hang. "We don't have room for baggage out here. You'll count socks and sort ration packs. Support the fight, stay out of the way, and keep your head down. Understood." Dismissal, cold and clean. Anna met his gaze without aggression, her face blank as if painted that way, her words calm. "Yes, sir. I will perform my assigned duties to the best of my ability." The colonel gave a humorless laugh. "I'm sure you will." He had already decided who she was, furniture. Anna turned, executed a crisp about-face, and walked back into the dust and heat. Her silence was not defeat. It was armor. It had always been armor. They thought she was invisible. Invisible was exactly how she had survived. Days passed in monotony. She scanned crates, reorganized inventory, cleaned the supply lines until they functioned with quiet efficiency. Evans began to notice just a little. She touched the rifles differently, as if each was an instrument, balanced them in her hands, tested the trigger with unconscious grace. Not like someone counting stock, like someone remembering a part of themselves. One evening she approached the wall where a 19-year-old Private Chen stacked sandbags. She paused, studying the angle of his work. "You should shift them, 45 degrees. That ridge," she pointed, "has a depression. Good place for a hide." Chen blinked, then smirked. "Thanks, ma'am, but the snipers have us covered." She said nothing more, just nodded and walked on. The seed was planted. The mountains would decide when it sprouted. Then on the second week, the silence broke. The shot came at midday, not the crack of a rifle, deeper, heavier. A boom that echoed across the valley. A heartbeat later, a round punched through the fuel tank at the motor pool, spilling black liquid across the dirt. No one saw where it came from, no muzzle flash, no movement, just silence. The next day, another shot. This one severed the comms antenna, the base's lifeline. And then it became a pattern. A shot every day or every other, each one perfect. Not to kill, but to remind. A ghost out there in the peaks. He could hit anything, anywhere, anytime. He wanted them to know it. Fear spread like infection. Soldiers jumped at echoes. Arguments flared. Morale bled away. Sergeant Gallow, the swaggering sniper team leader, spent hours through his scope. Nothing. He fired at shadows, mirages, dust devils, wasting ammunition, losing nerve. The ghost never fired back. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than bullets. Anna watched it all from her corner of the depot, calm, still. But inside her mind the map grew sharper. She tracked the time of day, the echo of each shot, the way the sound bent through the ridges. She had studied these winds. She knew their moods. And she knew something else. This ghost wasn't guessing. He was playing a game no one else at Kestrel even understood. She wasn't ready to speak, not yet. But the moment was coming. The day the water tank ruptured, spilling thousands of gallons into the dirt, she knew. This was no longer harassment. This was survival. The base couldn't last without water. Alarms screamed. Madson's fury spilled over radios. Gallow's voice came back broken, strained. "We don't know where he is, sir. Mirage is impossible. Winds are ripping. We can't find him." Inside the command post, chaos. Officers shouting, maps scattered, radios buzzing with panic. And then the door opened. Anna Vyulov walked in, calm as ever, a rolled topographical map in her hands. Every head turned. She wasn't supposed to be here. Logistics had no seat in war councils. "What do you want, specialist?" Madson's voice dripped with sarcasm. "We out of toilet paper," nervous laughter followed. She ignored it, walked to the table, unrolled the map, weighed it down with batteries, pointed to a ridge 3,000 yards out. "He's here." Her voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. It sliced through the noise. A lieutenant scoffed. 3,000 yards, no one can make that shot through this wind. Anna didn't look at him, she looked at Madson. He's not shooting through it, he's shooting over it. High-angle trajectory, dropping rounds near vertical. That's why you can't hear the muzzle blast. The sun blinds your spotters. The peak hides his echo. He's thinking in 3 dimensions. The tent went silent. Her words weren't speculation. They were certainty. Cold, clear, clinical. Madson's face tightened, pride warring with doubt. Before he could answer, the radio crackled. Gallow hit. Ricochet pinned down. Their only sniper team was out. And suddenly, every eye in the room turned back to the woman who had been counting socks a week ago. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't need to. The silence was her answer. What kind of soldier fixes a broken rifle before firing it? The order had come fast, almost desperate. Colonel Madson, his command unraveling in front of him, had barked out a command no one expected. "Get her a rifle." His tone carried fury, but beneath it something else: fear. Lieutenant Parker was the one who answered. Resentment in every step, every motion as he led Anna toward a battered steel locker. He didn't take her to Gallow's prized custom rifle. No. He reached for the cast-off, the weapon no one wanted, an old M24, its stock scarred, its scope mounts loose, its accuracy ruined long ago. "This is all we can spare," Parker sneered, his voice dripping with quiet sabotage. He wanted her to fail. Anna didn't argue. She took the rifle in her hands and for a long, quiet moment simply held it. Its weight was familiar. A flawed instrument, but still an instrument. She carried it to a bench without a word. The room was full of eyes. Soldiers pressed close, waiting for the punchline. Surely she'd fumble. Surely this supply clerk would show herself as the fraud they believed her to be. She ignored them all. For 15 minutes, the world shrank to steel, wood, and her hands. She broke the rifle down piece by piece, her motions clean, efficient, almost reverent. A bolt here, a pin there. She cleaned out months of grit with the care of someone restoring memory, not metal. Her touch was not the hurried scramble of an amateur, it was ritual, practiced, precise. And then she found it, the flaw, the reason the rifle was hated. The scope mounts, shifting imperceptibly with every vibration, a ghost of movement that turned bullets into failures. She said nothing, just reached for the floor where a discarded soda can glinted. She cut a sliver of aluminum with her multi-tool, a shim no bigger than a fingernail, folded it twice and slid it into the gap, tightened the screws. The scope sat firm, immovable. The soldiers fell quiet, jokes died in their throats. The act had been too fast, too certain, too knowing. Parker scowled. His trap had been disarmed, turned into proof of her craft. She reassembled the rifle, worked the bolt, dry-fired 3 times, listening to the sound, feeling the break point of the trigger. Each motion spoke of memory, of long practice far away from their mocking eyes. Finally she stood, carried the rifle to the sandbagged nest at the eastern perimeter, laid herself prone, and in that moment the weight of 3,000 yards lay between her and the truth. The wind was merciless. It howled through the valley, shifting, tearing, alive. The spotters muttered. The officers whispered. Colonel Madson folded his arms, his eyes fixed on her like a hawk daring her to fail. Anna didn't touch the digital rangefinder, didn't ask for the wind meter. She closed her eyes once, opened them again, and looked to the mountains. She watched the dust lift off a distant rock slide, the pattern of the kestrels spiraling higher on invisible thermals, the flutter of a torn prayer flag caught on an unseen current. Each was a voice. Together, they sang a truth no device could capture. Her breathing slowed. Inhale, exhale. The rifle was heavy but steady against her shoulder. To the soldiers watching, the world stretched tight. They expected her to wait for calm, to beg the wind for mercy. But Anna had learned differently. She became part of it. Her crosshairs steadied on shadow, not light. She exhaled half a breath, found the pause in her body's rhythm. In that single, fragile instant, everything narrowed. She squeezed. The rifle bucked. The sound vanished into the wind. 5 seconds of agony followed. Then through the spotter scope, a puff of pink mist bloomed on the ridge, rock dust and silence. And then nothing. The ghost was gone. Silence fell heavier than the shot. From the colonel to the youngest private, every face turned to her. She didn't look back. She worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, slid another round into place. Calm, prepared, as if this had been inevitable. The radio crackled. Target neutralized, confirmed. Madson lowered the handset, his knuckles pale. He had no words, Not for her, not for what he had almost destroyed by dismissal. But others had words. From the crowd, someone whispered, "Who the hell is she?" The answer came an hour later, with the whir of helicopter blades. A supply chopper, soldiers unloading crates, and stepping down into the dust, a man everyone recognized. Sergeant Major Cole. He was a relic and a legend both. A soldier whose name carried weight in whispered circles, his face carved in leather, his eyes cold steel. He was here for inspection, that was all. But as he scanned the base, his stride slowed. He saw the gathering at the eastern wall, saw the figure at its center, quietly cleaning a battered rifle. And he stopped dead. His face, usually stone, went pale. He changed course, walked straight to her. The crowd parted without needing to be told. Men and women who had mocked her a week ago stepped aside, silent. Anna looked up when his shadow fell across her. Recognition flickered across her features for the first time. "Cole," she murmured, her voice low, steady. "It's been a long time." The sergeant major didn't smile. His lips parted, but no words came at first. His gaze dropped to the rifle, then back to her eyes. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of history. "My God, they buried you out here." Then quieter, almost reverent, "Spectre." The name hit the air like a charge. Soldiers stiffened, eyes darting. They had heard that word before, but never like this. "Spectre." The call sign of a ghost story passed through barracks like myth. A sniper who could bend the impossible. A leader of Wraith, the unit that officially never existed. Missions erased, victories unclaimed, but whispers endured. Spectre was said to do what physics refused to allow. And now she was here, a logistics clerk with a graying ponytail. The crowd didn't know whether to believe it, but Cole knew. He saluted, not casual, not polite, but sharp, formal, reverent. A salute from warrior to warrior. Rank meant nothing in that moment. Anna returned his gaze, then gave a single nod. Small, final, a conversation in silence only they could share. Inside the command post, Madson was on a secure line, his face drained of blood as the truth hit him in classified whispers. The black ink in her file was peeling back in his ears. Specialist Anna Vyulov, service number confirmed, former commander of Omega Detachment. Call sign, Spectre. And the colonel who had mocked her as baggage now realized the depth of his failure. He hadn't just underestimated a soldier. He had insulted a legend. When he emerged from the post, his walk was stiff, his pride broken but his tone forced into humility. He faced her, the crowd watching, his voice formal. "Specialist Vyulov," he said, without sarcasm this time. "Effective immediately, you are reassigned. You will take command of all Overwatch security and counter-sniper teams. You will own these mountains. You will report directly to me." It wasn't a promotion, it was surrender. Anna didn't smile, didn't gloat. She gave the same words she had before. "Yes, sir." But now they meant something else entirely. That night the wind stilled. The sky cleared to a tapestry of impossible stars. Anna stood in Tower 3, the very one she had marked as vulnerable the day she arrived. It was hers now. In her hands, not the battered M24, but a new rifle flown in under special orders. A weapon of precision, lethal beauty, steel and carbon built to extend human reach into the far horizon. She did not scan for threats, not tonight. Tonight she watched. And when Private Chen climbed the ladder with 2 mugs of coffee, his steps hesitant, his eyes wide with a different kind of respect, he handed her one wordlessly. He spoke of sandbags, of mistakes, of guilt. She cut him off gently. "You'll listen next time." He nodded he would. And when he left, she stood alone again, the mountains quiet at last. They had dismissed her, mocked her, handed her a broken rifle. And with one shot, one impossible shot, she had reminded them of the truth. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did she feel heavier now that the silence was gone? Fob Kestrel had changed overnight. The ghost sniper was dead. The mountains, once menacing, now seemed still. Soldiers walked with a little more ease, voices louder, steps lighter. But in that lightness, all eyes carried a new weight. They looked at her differently now. Where before they had seen a supply clerk, now they saw something else. A rumor turned flesh. "Spectre." Anna felt it in the glances, the whispered words carried like static across the dust. Some were filled with awe, some with fear, some with envy. She had not asked for any of it, but it came anyway. Colonel Madson wasted no time. At dawn, he called her into the command tent. His voice stripped of arrogance now, his tone clipped, professional. "You're in charge of Overwatch. I want these mountains owned. No more surprises." It wasn't an offer. It was an admission. He had no choice but to trust the woman he had once mocked. Anna listened in silence, nodding once when he finished. Understood. When she left the tent, the murmurs started again. This time, no one dared say them loud. She walked to the eastern perimeter, her boots crunching over gravel, her steps unhurried. Soldiers turned their heads as she passed. Some nodded, uncertain whether to salute a specialist who carried the air of command. Some avoided her eyes altogether, as though looking too long might expose them to something they didn't understand. Private Chen stood guard near the wall. When she approached, he straightened so sharply he nearly dropped his rifle. "Ma'am." Anna looked at him for a long moment. Then she adjusted the angle of his scope by a fraction, setting it tighter against the sandbags. "There," she said softly. "Now it won't drift." Chen blinked, nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." Her hands lingered on the scope a second longer. Not for the adjustment, for the memory. So many years, so many rifles, so many shots. It all came back whether she wanted it or not. That night she sat alone in Tower 3, her new rifle across her lap. The silence of the mountains pressed in. It wasn't threatening anymore, but it wasn't friendly either. It was simply vast, empty, waiting. And she wondered, why had she stayed hidden so long? Why had she let herself be buried? The answer was simple, but bitter. Because some ghosts were easier to carry in silence than in daylight. The memories had never left. The missions no one spoke of. The team she had led, wraith men and women who had followed her into the shadows, who had trusted her aim to carve survival out of impossible odds. Some of them had lived, some had not. Their faces still came to her in quiet hours. And then the mission that ended it all. The one scrubbed from every record. Political fallout dressed as strategy. They had shut Wraith down, erased its history, redacted her name, buried her under paperwork. Anna had accepted it, not because she wanted to, because there had been no choice. To protest was to burn, to vanish in silence was to survive. But now one shot, one ghost, one impossible afternoon, and she was seen again. The soldiers called her Spectre now, whispered it like prayer, like warning. She didn't correct them, she didn't claim it either. She let it live between them, heavy and unspoken. Over the next week, she reshaped the base without fanfare. She walked the perimeter daily, mapping fields of fire, shifting sandbags, correcting sight lines. She broke down every rifle in the armory, teaching the young armorers what grit looked like, how to feel flaws with fingertips, how to coax accuracy from steel that others dismissed as broken. She drilled the sniper team survivors on wind reading, not with gadgets but with the land itself, the kestrels, the prayer flags, the dust plumes. Some resisted at first. Their pride chafed under the quiet authority of a woman old enough to be their mother. But the longer they listened, the more they saw the difference in results. Bullets that once scattered now landed true. Patterns that had once been chaos revealed themselves as rhythms. Corporal Evans watched it all with a kind of reverence. The boy who had once explained barcodes to her like she was a child now followed her every word, every movement, storing them away as if afraid they might vanish. "She doesn't just know rifles," he whispered once to Chen when he thought she couldn't hear. "She knows war itself." Anna had heard, she pretended she hadn't, praise meant nothing, only preparation did. Because she knew the ghost sniper had not been the end. He had been the opening move. War didn't stop with one man, war never stopped. And so she trained them. She hardened the base. She mapped the ridges, catalogued blind spots, turned Fob Kestrel into a place that breathed vigilance. But at night, when the stars burned sharp and cold, she sat alone with her thoughts. The question that never left: what would it cost her this time to be seen? The answer came in fragments, a name muttered in her memory, Cole's whisper when he had recognized her. They buried you out here. Buried. Now unearthed. The higher commands knew, the colonel knew, the soldiers knew, Spectre lived again. And with that name came the weight of expectation. The myth was no longer hiding in the dark. It was walking in daylight, carrying a rifle. She didn't want it, but she didn't run from it either. Because myths couldn't run. They endured. One night, as the wind shifted colder, Cole found her in the tower. He climbed the ladder slow, his boots careful on the rungs. She didn't look at him at first. She knew his steps. She knew the man too well. "Spectre," he said softly. She sighed. "Don't call me that." He leaned against the rail beside her, his broad shoulders creaking the wood. "You don't get to choose, Anna. You never did." Silence stretched between them. Only the wind moved, whispering against the sandbags. Finally she spoke. "I didn't want this. I wanted quiet." Cole nodded. "I know, but you're here now, and they need you." She looked at him then, really looked. His face was as scarred as hers, his eyes carrying ghosts of their own. He wasn't wrong, but knowing it didn't make it easier. "You think they'll ever see me for more than the myth?" she asked quietly. Cole shook his head. "Doesn't matter, you just do what you do, that's all they'll remember." Anna turned back to the mountains. The stars blurred for a moment, her vision wet though no tears fell. She had been invisible, now she was exposed, and though the soldiers saw her as strength, inside she felt the crack of weight. A myth couldn't falter, a myth couldn't break, but she wasn't a myth. She was a woman, tired, scarred, carrying too many memories. And she wondered how long she could carry both truths. The wind rose again, cold and sharp, and she wrapped her fingers tighter around the rifle. The mountains whispered, waiting, watching. And Anna Vulov's Spectre listened in silence. Because silence had always been her greatest weapon. Why did the mountains go quiet before the storm? For nearly 2 weeks, Fob Kestrel held its breath. After the ghost sniper fell, no shot echoed from the ridges. No whispers of death. No sudden punctures in steel or flesh. Soldiers began to believe again in sleep, in laughter, in something like safety. But Anna didn't. Safety was the most dangerous illusion of all. Every morning she walked the perimeter before the sun climbed high. Boots grinding into gravel, rifle resting lightly against her shoulder, eyes tracing the folds of the mountains. The men watched her as she passed, some saluting stiffly, some lowering their gazes, none daring the smirk they once wore. She saw their relief, she didn't share it. One evening, as the wind died into an eerie calm, Private Chen leaned against the wall beside her. He had grown bolder, more willing to speak. "Feels strange, ma'am, like it's too quiet." Anna didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the ridgeline. "That's because it is." The boy shifted uncomfortably, fingers brushing the trigger of his rifle. "You think they'll try again?" She finally turned, her eyes steady on his. "They don't stop because one man falls. War isn't one shot, it's pressure, endless." Chen swallowed. He didn't answer, he didn't need to. The next morning proved her right. It started with smoke, distant plumes rising from the valley floor, curling black against the pale sky. A supply convoy ambushed miles from base. Radio chatter screamed through the command post, broken and panicked. 2 trucks burning, survivors scattered, pinned down. Madson barked orders, face purple with rage, spittle flying as he demanded air support. Reinforcements, answers. Anna stood quietly at the edge of the tent. She didn't interrupt. Not yet. Then another voice cut in, frantic, "Hi. They're not after supplies, sir. They're driving them toward the pass." Static swallowed the rest. Anna's head snapped toward the map pinned on the wall. She traced the valley with her finger, lips pressed tight. A funnel. A trap. The convoy wasn't the prize, the pass was. And beyond the pass, a direct approach to Fob Kestrel's western flank. She spoke only once, quiet, sharp, enough to freeze the room. "They're moving artillery." The tent went silent. Madson spun on her. "How would you know that?" Anna didn't flinch. "Because it's what I would do." A ripple of unease passed through the officers. The word lingered, heavier than the smoke outside. Artillery. Kestrel wasn't built to withstand it. A single well-placed battery could reduce the base to rubble in hours. Madson's jaw clenched. His pride resisted, but his fear won. "Fine, what do you suggest?" Anna stepped forward, eyes on the map. "Cut them before they reach the pass. They're heavy. They'll move slow, hit the drivers, not the guns." Cole, standing silent until now, grunted. "She's right." And just like that, the decision was made. By dusk, Anna lay prone on a rocky outcrop, wind biting at her cheek, the custom rifle pressed into her shoulder. Evans lay beside her, serving as spotter, though his hands shook from nerves. Below in the valley, shadows crawled, trucks grinding up the dirt road, canvas covers hiding the artillery beneath. Evans whispered, "Range 2700, crosswind shifting." Anna cut him off gently. "I see it." Her breathing slowed. The mountain spoke. The kestrels wheeled. The dust plumes bent. She read them all, weaving them into a silent calculation. Her crosshairs settled on the lead driver's window. Exhale, pause, squeeze. The crack vanished into the wind. A heartbeat later, the driver's skull erupted, the truck swerving hard into the ditch. Chaos rippled through the convoy. Men shouting, scrambling, weapons firing wild into the ridges. Anna shifted, fired again. Another driver fell. The second truck lurched sideways, blocking the road. "Reload," she murmured, her voice calm. Evans' hands worked frantically, sliding rounds into the chamber. The convoy collapsed in panic. Engines roared, wheels spun, but the narrow road was clogged now, steel and bodies tangled. The artillery was trapped. From the base, mortar fire began to arc, guided by her silent corrections over the radio. One by one, the trucks went up in flames, black smoke towering into the sky. It should have been a victory. But Anna felt no triumph as she pulled back from the scope, only inevitability. The enemy wasn't gone. They had shown their hand, coordinated, prepared, willing to bleed resources to break Kestrel. And this was just the beginning. That night she sat alone in Tower 3, staring at the stars. Evans found her there, still jittering from adrenaline, his words tumbling out. You saved us, ma'am. I mean, without you, those guns, we'd be done. I've never seen." Anna silenced him with a look, not cruel, just steady. "Don't mistake survival for victory," she said softly. He fell quiet, the lesson sinking into him like stone into deep water. When he left, Cole climbed the ladder, slower, heavier. He leaned against the rail, eyes narrowed at the horizon. "They'll come harder next time," he muttered. Anna nodded. "They always do." Cole studied her, his jaw tight. Then quieter, "You ready for that, to be Spectre again?" She didn't answer at first. She couldn't. Finally she whispered, "I never stopped being her. I just stopped letting anyone see." Cole's gaze softened. For a moment, just a moment, the hardened sergeant major let humanity show. And what happens now that they see? Anna's hands tightened on the rifle. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ridges, dark and endless. "They'll expect the myth," she said, "but all they'll get is me." Her voice cracked then, the smallest fracture, before she steadied it again. Cole said nothing. He didn't need to. The wind picked up, whispering through the tower. The mountains shifted in shadow, and Anna Vilov stood there knowing the storm was not over, it was only beginning. How long could fear stay hidden before it found its way to the surface? The warning came at night. A ripple of radio chatter, a flare of heat signatures on the far ridges, shadows moving where none should be. The base sirens howled through the dark, dragging men from their bunks, boots pounding on dirt, rifles clattering as hands scrambled for magazines. Anna was already awake. She had been sitting in Tower 3, rifle across her knees, listening to the wind. She always listened to the wind. Tonight it carried something different, not just the hiss of sand and stone, but a rhythm, a pulse. Many feet moving in unison, far away but closing. When the siren screamed, she was already on her scope. Contact North Ridge, her voice cut across the radio net, calm, stripped of urgency. Multiple elements, coordinated. The word hung heavy, coordinated. Not scattered raiders, not harassing fire. This was formation, strategy, an attack meant to break them. Colonel Madson stormed into the command tent, barking orders. Mortar teams lit fuses. Heavy guns swung toward the dark. But under the chaos, his eyes kept flicking to her, as if anchoring himself against her silence. In the towers, young soldiers trembled behind their scopes. Private Chen's breath came fast, fogging his optics. Corporal Evans fumbled a magazine, his hands shaking. And Anna spoke steady as stone. "Breathe, don't chase shadows, trust the wind." Her words slipped through their radios like water into cracks, calming, settling. Then the first mortar shell arced overhead, crashing into the mountainside with a thunderclap. Fire bloomed, the night lit red, and the assault began. They came in waves, shadows pouring from the ridges, muzzle flashes spitting like fireflies, voices screaming in a language carried raw by the wind. Hundreds of them, moving fast, determined, firing as they ran. Kestrel's walls erupted in reply. Machine guns rattled, mortars pounded, rifles cracked in stuttering rhythm. The base shuddered with the sound of survival. Anna lay prone in her tower, her scope sweeping. She didn't fire yet. She read the battle, tracked movement, counted beats, waited for the pattern. And then she saw it, the leader, moving differently, shouting commands that cut through the chaos. A flicker of authority in the madness. Her breath slowed, crosshairs steadied. Exhale, pause, squeeze. The rifle roared, recoil pressing into her shoulder. Through the scope, the leader crumpled. The wave hesitated, fractured. "Leader down," she said softly, though every man on the net had already felt it. The assault staggered, then pushed harder. Rockets streaked toward the wall, exploding in fire and dirt. One tower shook under impact, sandbags bursting open, soldiers screaming as shrapnel tore through them. Chen's voice cracked over the radio. "Tower 2 hit, we've got casualties." "Hold position," Anna's reply cut sharp. "Adjust, cover the gap." Her own rifle fired again. Another, each shot deliberate, surgical. Where her bullets landed, enemy momentum broke. But inside, beneath the rhythm of trigger and breath, fear pulsed. Not fear of dying, that had left her long ago. Fear of failing. Fear of being less than the myth they now believed her to be. Fear of being seen, not as specter, not as savior, but as Anna, scarred, aging, tired. Every time her finger touched the trigger, that fear whispered. Not this one, not perfect, not enough. But she fired anyway. Hours bled. The mountains shook with gunfire. The air filled with smoke, dirt, screams. Men fell. More waves surged. The enemy pressed harder, desperate to break Kestrel's walls. At one point, Evans shouted into her ear, "We're running low on ammo." Anna didn't answer. She shifted her fire, conserving rounds, choosing shots only when they mattered most. Her calm steadied Evans more than any order could. Near dawn, when the sky began to pale, the attack faltered. The enemy retreated back into the ridges, dragging bodies, leaving the valley littered with their dead. The sirens died. Guns fell silent. Smoke drifted like torn curtains across the battlefield. Kestrel still stood, but the cost was written in blood across its walls. Tower 2 half collapsed, sandbags blackened with soot, the ground beneath it soaked dark. Dozens wounded, too many dead. Anna climbed down from Tower 3 slowly, her body heavy, rifle slung across her back. Soldiers watched her pass, their faces haggard, eyes hollow. Some nodded with respect, some with gratitude, some with fear. In the command tent, Madson leaned over the table, sweat dripping down his face, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting. When he looked up and saw her, something in his expression shifted. Resentment was gone. What replaced it wasn't admiration. It was dependence. He spoke low, rough. "We'd be ash without you." Anna didn't reply. She didn't want his words. She wanted silence. She walked out again, into the morning light, where bodies were being carried on stretchers, where the wounded cried quietly in corners, where young soldiers sat trembling with the aftershocks of survival. Chen was among them, his face streaked with soot, his hands still shaking. When he saw her, he stood, straightened, saluted. His eyes were wet. "You saved us," he whispered. Anna looked at him, at all of them. She thought of the ones who hadn't been saved, the empty beds, the names that would never be spoken again except in mourning. Her throat tightened, her chest ached, but she only said, "We saved each other." That night the stars burned cold above the mountains. She sat alone again in Tower 3, her rifle across her knees. The silence pressed heavy. And inside, for the first time in years, Anna allowed herself a truth she had buried deep. She was afraid. Afraid not of death. Afraid of the weight of being seen, of carrying a myth that didn't belong to flesh and bone. Afraid that next time, and there would always be a next time, her hand might shake, her eye might falter, and the legend would shatter. She gripped the rifle tighter, her knuckles white, and whispered to the dark, words only the wind could hear. "I'm not Spectre, I'm just Anna." The mountains didn't answer, they never did. Why did the silence after victory feel more dangerous than the battle itself? The assault had broken against Kestrel's walls like waves against stone. But as the smoke cleared and the bodies were counted, the quiet that followed was not relief. It was waiting. Anna felt it in the stillness of the ridges. The enemy had tested their strength and failed. They would not leave empty-handed. They would come again, harder, smarter, determined to prove that even Spectre could bleed. She stood at the perimeter, her rifle slung across her back, eyes scanning the mountains. Soldiers moved around her, repairing walls, stacking sandbags, dragging the wreckage of shattered towers into piles. Their faces were gray with exhaustion, their eyes sunken, but when they glanced at her, something lit inside them. Belief. They had seen her in the fight. They had watched her shots turn chaos into survival. To them, she was more than a specialist now. She was the anchor holding the base together. And that belief was the heaviest weight she had ever carried. In the command tent, Colonel Madson briefed the officers with a voice scraped raw from shouting. He pointed at maps, circled routes, cursed supply delays, demanded reinforcements that command might never send. His pride was gone now, stripped bare by desperation. But even as he spoke, his gaze kept slipping to Anna, standing silent at the edge of the room. When he finished, he gestured at her with a tired hand. "You see anything we're missing?" It was more than a question. It was surrender. Anna stepped forward, her voice calm. "They'll come again, but not at the wall. They'll cut deeper. They'll take hostages if they can. They'll want to break us from the inside." The officers shifted uneasily. Madson's jaw tightened. "And how do we stop that?" Her gaze swept across the map. "We don't wait for them to choose the ground. We take it back, patrols into the valley, eyes on the ridges at all times. No blind spots." Madson hesitated. "That's risky, we'll bleed out there." Her answer was sharp, certain. "We'll bleed more if we don't." The tent fell silent. No one argued. That night, patrols stretched into the valley for the first time in weeks. Young soldiers moved through the dark, rifles trembling in their hands, but steadied by the thought that she was watching from the towers. And Anna was always watching. From her perch in Tower 3, she tracked every shadow, every flicker of movement. Her rifle was steady, her breath measured, her heart calm. But inside, the fear gnawed at her ribs. Because she knew the enemy was watching too. They wanted her. They didn't just want to break Kestrel. They wanted to break the myth that now lived within its walls. To kill Spectre would be to kill the belief that held the base together. And Anna knew she could not afford to miss, not once. The first strike came 3 nights later. A patrol ambushed in the valley, radio screams tearing through the static, gunfire echoing through the mountains, a frantic voice, "They've got Chen, they've got him." Anna froze. Her hands gripped the rail of the tower, eyes snapping to the valley where muzzle flashes flared. She heard the chaos, the terror. Chen's voice, cut short, dragged into silence. Her chest tightened. She had warned them. She had told them the enemy would take hostages, and now they had. Madson's voice erupted over the net, ordering reinforcements, demanding positions, his fury masking panic. But Anna's mind was already moving, faster, sharper. She knew what the enemy wanted. They would not kill Chen quickly. They would use him. They would bait her. Evans rushed up the ladder, his face pale. "Ma'am, they've got him. What do we do?" Anna didn't answer. Not yet. She forced her breathing steady, eyes locked on the ridges where shadows danced. Finally she spoke, her voice low. "We do nothing, not yet." Evans stared at her, horrified. "Nothing, they'll kill him." Her gaze flicked to him, sharp. "If we rush, they kill him anyway. We wait. We make them move first." It was the hardest truth she had ever spoken, and it hollowed her out inside. Hours dragged like years. The patrol staggered back, bloodied and broken, but without Chen. The camp fell into restless silence. Soldiers whispered, eyes darting to her, waiting for orders, for miracles. But Anna said nothing. She sat in her tower, her rifle silent, her body still. Inside she was breaking. She saw Chen's face in her mind. Young, eager. The way he had handed her coffee on a cold night, the guilt in his eyes when he hadn't listened about the sandbags. She had promised in her silence that he would learn, that he would survive. And now he was gone. Because she had told them to patrol. Because she had been Spectre. The next morning, the enemy made their move. A body appeared on the ridge. Chen, bound, beaten, shoved to his knees. A figure stood behind him, rifle pressed to his head. Their voices carried across the valley, amplified by cruel silence. "Spectre," the figure shouted, "we know you're there, come for him or watch him die." Every soldier on the wall froze. All eyes turned to her. She felt the weight of their stares pressing into her skin, heavy as stone. They expected her to move, to act, to save him. Her heart hammered, her breath caught. She was Spectre, she was Anna, and Anna knew the truth, this was a trap. Her hands shook for the first time. She gripped the rifle tight, forcing stillness, but inside her chest ached. If she moved, she risked everyone. If she didn't, Chen would die. The myth demanded perfection. The woman could only choose one wound over another. She closed her eyes just for a moment, whispering into the dark inside her. "Forgive me." Then she opened them again, and her scope found the ridge. What did it mean to be a legend if you couldn't save just one life? The ridge was quiet except for the wind. Chen knelt on the rocky edge, hands bound, head bowed. Behind him stood a figure in dark fatigues, face masked, rifle pressed to the boy's temple. Their posture radiated calm cruelty. "Spectre," the voice carried again, harsh, mocking. "We know you're here, show yourself, trade your life for his." The soldiers on Kestrel's wall gripped their rifles tighter, eyes flicking between the hostage on the ridge and the silent figure in Tower 3. Every face turned toward her, searching for the myth they believed in. Anna lay prone, her rifle steady, her cheek pressed to the stock. Through her scope, the world shrank to two figures on stone, Chen trembling, the captor solid and sure. Her finger rested on the trigger, her heart pounded. This was the shot they wanted, the trap. And she knew the truth, there was no perfect choice. If she fired and missed by an inch, Chen was dead. If she hesitated, the captor pulled the trigger anyway. If she tried to move, to close distance, she exposed herself to every rifle waiting in the shadows. Her breath caught, her chest tightened. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of being wrong. The myth couldn't be wrong. Spectre was flawless. Spectre bent physics to her will. Spectre made impossible shots. But Anna was human, scarred, tired, hands trembling as memory pressed against the present. Through the scope she saw not Chen but other faces, men and women she had lost in missions erased from the record, soldiers who had trusted her aim, her judgment, her silence. Some had lived because of her, some had died despite her. Their ghosts crowded the glass of her scope, whispering, reminding. Evan's voice broke into her headset, choked with fear. "Ma'am, you can do this. You're Spectre. You can't miss." The words cut sharper than any blade. She almost whispered back, "I'm not Spectre, I'm just Anna." But she didn't. She exhaled half a breath. The world stilled. Her crosshairs found the sliver of space, the angle between Chen's temple and the captor's cheek, barely a breath wide, an impossible shot. But wasn't that what they all expected of her? Her finger tightened. And then, for the first time in years, she prayed, not for herself, for the boy, for forgiveness, for strength enough to be more than human just this once more. The rifle roared. The recoil pressed into her shoulder, the sound stolen by the wind. Through the scope she saw the captor's head snap sideways, blood blooming in a spray. Chen flinched, fell forward, alive. Alive. Anna's chest heaved, her vision blurred for a moment. Relief and guilt tangled, choking her. She had saved him, but not because she was flawless, because she had gambled, because luck, not legend, had carried the round true. On the ridge, chaos erupted. More figures surged from cover, shouting, firing wildly. Bullets sparked against stone near Chen as he scrambled, panicked, trying to crawl away. Anna's voice snapped over the radio. Cover fire, suppress the ridge. Kestrel's walls erupted. Machine guns thundered, mortars arced, rifles cracked in frantic rhythm. Dust and smoke swallowed the figures as Chen slid, tumbled, rolled down the slope, scrambling toward the valley. Anna shifted her aim, firing again and again. Each shot not to kill, but to carve space, to cut paths through fire for the boy to survive. Finally, Chen stumbled into the open, collapsing into the arms of soldiers rushing from the base. His face streaked with blood and dust, but alive. Alive. The firefight on the ridge raged longer, then fell silent as the enemy melted back into the mountains. When the last shot faded, the valley lay heavy with smoke. Chen was carried back into camp, trembling, wide-eyed, muttering incoherent thanks. Soldiers surrounded him, clapping his back, cheering his survival. The myth had grown. Spectre had done the impossible again. But Anna felt none of it. She climbed down from her tower slowly, her rifle heavy in her hands, her body hollow. Cole met her at the bottom, his weathered face unreadable. He studied her eyes for a long moment, then spoke low, just for her. "You made the shot." She shook her head. "I made a gamble." Cole's gaze softened, but his words were firm. "Doesn't matter, he's alive." Anna looked past him, toward the young soldier being carried into the medical tent, his face pale but living. Her throat tightened. "Yes," she whispered, "he's alive." But inside she knew the truth. One day the gamble would fail. One day the myth would crack. That night she sat in her tower again, the stars cold above, the mountains silent. She stripped her rifle, cleaned each piece, her hands steady but her chest aching. Every soldier in the base believed she was unshakable. That Spectre was back, flawless as the stories whispered. But alone, with only the wind for company, Anna let the mask slip. Her hands trembled once, just once, before she forced them still. And she whispered again, so softly the night almost swallowed it. "I'm not who they think I am." The mountains gave no answer. They never did. What happens when the myth you've become is the cage you can't escape. The hostage standoff had changed everything. Chen lived, but Anna felt no triumph. She felt the walls closing in tighter. The soldiers believed more than ever now, believed in the legend, the ghost, the impossible shot. But legends were brittle, and Anna knew how easily they shattered. For days after, Kestrel became sharper, harder, patrols doubled, towers fortified. Every soldier leaned into vigilance as though the ridges themselves might crack open. And yet beneath it all ran a current of unease. Because if Spectre could make that shot, then surely she could make every shot. Surely she could never fail. It was a belief, as comforting as it was dangerous. Anna walked the perimeter each morning, silent as always, her eyes tracing the ridges. Soldiers saluted her now, some with respect, some with awe, some with the quiet fear of those who worshipped what they didn't understand. She gave nothing back, no words, no gestures, just the silence they mistook for certainty. One night as she sat in Tower 3, Cole climbed the ladder again. He moved slower now, shoulders bent under years of weight. He leaned against the rail beside her, his breath heavy. "You've given them hope," he said quietly. Anna shook her head. "I've given them an illusion." Cole studied her profile, the scar above her brow catching starlight. Illusion or not, it's keeping them alive. She didn't answer. She just kept her eyes on the ridges, the rifle resting across her knees. The enemy came again 3 nights later. Not in waves this time, not in chaos, in precision. Mortar rounds fell first, lighting the valley in bursts of fire. Then machine gun fire poured from the ridges, pinning towers, cutting down soldiers who moved too slow. And then silence. It was the silence that told Anna what was coming. "They're moving inside," she whispered into her radio. Seconds later, the alarms shrieked. Enemy fighters breached the western wall, slipping through smoke and shattered barriers. The fight was no longer out there. It was inside Kestrel. Gunfire rattled across tents. Shadows darted between buildings. Soldiers shouted in panic, firing at silhouettes that slipped like ghosts. Anna was already moving. She abandoned her tower, rifle slung across her back, pistol drawn as she sprinted across the compound. The myth lived in the ridges, but Anna had always lived where the fight was dirtiest. She moved through smoke and chaos, her steps measured, eyes sharp. Every corner, every shadow was red before she turned it. 2 fighters broke from cover ahead. She dropped them with 3 rounds, her pistol steady, her breath calm. Evans stumbled into view, blood on his sleeve, his eyes wide with fear. "They're inside the depot," he gasped. Anna's chest tightened. The depot, the beating heart of the base, where supplies, ammunition, and wounded all converged. If the enemy held it, Kestrel would bleed out in hours. She pushed past him, sprinting hard. The depot was chaos. Smoke curled from shattered walls, bullets punched through canvas. Soldiers shouted as they scrambled for cover. Inside, enemy fighters had dug in, spraying fire from overturned crates. And in the middle of it all, Chen. His face pale, his rifle clutched tight though his hands trembled. He saw her through the smoke, his eyes wide. "Ma'am." Before he could finish, a round snapped past his head, punching a hole through the wall. Anna dropped to a knee, rifle unslung in one fluid motion. The myth demanded precision. The woman demanded survival. Both pressed down on her finger as she squeezed. 1 shot, 2, 3, fighters crumpled. The depot shook with echoes. The rest of the unit rallied, emboldened by her fire. Machine guns roared, grenades boomed, and within minutes, the depot was theirs again. Silence followed. Smoke hung heavy, Bodies littered the floor. Anna stood in the center, her rifle smoking, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Soldiers looked at her with something beyond respect now, reverence. But her eyes weren't on them. They were on Chen, who still trembled, his breath ragged, his fear raw. She crossed to him, placed a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was low, softer than they had ever heard it. "You lived." He nodded, eyes wet. "Because of you." She shook her head. "Because you fought." The boy swallowed, his throat tight. He wanted to believe her, but he didn't. Not yet. Later, when the smoke cleared and the wounded were carried to triage, Anna sat alone outside the depot. Her hands shook now, hidden in the dark. Cole found her there, as he always did. He lowered himself beside her with a groan, his voice rough. "You kept them alive again." Anna didn't look at him. "For how long?" Cole exhaled, the sound heavy. "As long as it takes." She finally turned to him, her eyes sharp, wet with unshed tears. "They think I'm Spectre. They think I can't fail, but I can, I will, one day soon." Cole's gaze held hers. "And when that day comes, they'll still fight, because you showed them how. That's the point, Anna, not that you never fail, that you never stop." Her chest ached. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Instead, she looked back at the mountains, quiet now, watching, waiting. And for the first time, she let herself accept the truth. She wasn't the myth, she was the woman behind it, broken, scarred, human. And that was enough. That night, as stars spread across the black sky, she climbed Tower 3 once more. She stood at the edge, her rifle resting in her hands, the wind whispering around her. She didn't scan for enemies. She didn't need to. The mountains were hers now, not because she was Spectre, but because she had endured long enough to remind them of one truth: that the most dangerous weapon on any battlefield isn't the one you see. It's the one you dismiss. Her silence spoke louder than words, heavier than myth. And as dawn broke over Kestrel, painting the ridges in fire, Anna Vyulov, Spectre to them, Anna to herself, stood watch. Not flawless, not perfect, but unbroken. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.